evening, friends, and welcome to the Mythic Imagination. In his famous poem, The Second Coming, the great Irish poet William Butler Yeats wrote of the modern age, "Their ceremony of innocence is drowned, the best lack all conviction, while the worst are filled with passionate intensity." In the past few months, we have experienced one of the most bizarre and alarming electoral processes in modern history. Thankfully, we are coming to the final stages of this grotesque political theater. But however bizarre and pathetic this political theater has become, however illusory and deceptive the process, there are certain truths that have clearly emerged. We are a divided society, a society in which rational discourse and civil behavior is quickly being displaced by demagoguery and violence. And whether it be on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, or in a Republican rally in Chicago, the citizens of this country are angry, they're alienated, and they are divided between race and class and desperately looking for a political alternative to a corrupt two-party political system. A system which has betrayed the hopes, the dreams, and the economic security of our working class people into the hands of a corporate oligarchy who are more than willing to sacrifice the principles of equality and justice on the altars of profit and greed. A corporate cabal who not only controls the political process, but for all intents and purposes runs the federal government. One of our most insightful political journalists, Chris Hedges, wrote, "By participating in the cash-drenched charade of a two-party Democratic election, voters dutifully play their assigned role as Democrat or Republican, giving legitimacy to a corporate system dedicated to our impoverishment and our disempowerment. All the things that stand between us and utter destitution, Medicare, food stamps, Pell Grants, Head Start, Social Security, public education, public health, are about to be shredded by the corporate state. Now, our corporate oligarchs are harvesting the nation, grabbing as much as they can, as fast as they can, in the inevitable descent of our country." Hedges reminds us that politicians are the public face of corporate power. They are corporate employees, and their personal stories, their promises, their rhetoric are meaningless. And that is why presidential campaigns cost billions of dollars. The corporate state does not produce a product that is different, but it produces brands that are different, and brands cost money. The one statement that has stood out for me more than any other during this electoral season was a statement made by Bernie Sanders. He said, regardless of who is elected president, they will be powerless to bring about change in the political process. In order to do that, you have to have a grassroots movement, a political revolt of the people, by the people, and for the people. One of the most important and genuine voices that is speaking for the people on the northern coast of California is an award-winning writer and journalist, Tim Martin. Tim is an opinion columnist for the Times-Standard newspaper in Eureka, California, and he is a screenwriter, novelist, literary journalist, and commentator for National Public Radio, as well as a member of the Vietnam Veterans for Peace. And I'm pleased that he is here in our studios this evening for some lively political commentary and to share his views on the state of our current political process. Well, welcome to the studio, Tim. Thanks so much for coming in for our conversation this afternoon.
Pleasure to be here, Lynn.
Listen, you wrote in an article, in a recent article that you wrote, "Another election will not solve our problems." You said, "Welcome to the 2016 presidential election. It's the weirdest show on earth." And it certainly has been a weird show on earth, hasn't it?
Oh, it has, and it's just going to get weirder. It's unlike anything I think we've ever experienced for decades in this country. And it's almost because I look at it like something has broken loose. We've finally reached the end of our rope for whatever reason on the right and the left. And these people are ready to go at each other. Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have offered something that none of these other politicians have been able to offer. And I'm not quite sure what that is, but I see both good and bad in it.
Well, certainly Donald Trump has brought up issues, whether you hate him, whether you like him, whatever it is, right? Donald Trump had enough money so that he could actually run a third-party candidacy, right? And he wanted to hang out with the Republicans as long as he possibly could. But I mean, it was clear from the beginning that you know, this guy has so much money that if push comes down to shove, right, he can do his own thing. And that's really what I think you need in order to break out of this monopoly that these two-party systems that the Democrats and the Republicans have had on us, right?
There's no other way to change, as far as I can see. He's a loose cannon. Some people call Bernie Sanders a loose cannon because they label him a socialist. In this country, that's a loose cannon. Yeah. But they both have been able to really get the attention of the people, and I don't see there any going back. I mean, even after this is over, I think the next election, you're going to see more people like them running for office. I think it may be the end of the two-party system.
Well, I heard an interesting interview with Ralph Nader recently, and you know, this is precisely what Ralph Nader was saying. He was saying that, and he should know. You remember when, you know, Ralph Nader's been saying this for many, many years, that we need to break out of this two-party political system if there's going to be any help for working-class people in this country. Right? And the only way to break out of what he calls this corporate oligarchy that's really become our federal government, right? Is by having someone that has enough money, independent of those parties, to run for the presidency. Right. And you know, Ross Perot started this a number of years ago, and then he got about halfway through the process. He was a day older, and he kind of petered out. But Ross Perot still brought in like 13 million votes then, right? Yes. And so even a leftist like. And I say that in the best sense of the word leftist, right? Leftists like Ralph Nader thinks that this is a good thing. Now, that doesn't mean Ralph Nader's going to vote for him, right? But he sees this dynamic as having the possibility to bring about change, and that's sort of the way that you wrote a recent article a couple months ago that you got a lot of flack about when you were talking about Donald Trump, right? Yeah. But I think that was kind of like the point that, one of the points that you were trying to make is like, now wait a minute, you know, this guy may be a demagogue, you may not like this guy, this may be a horrible thing for this country that this guy is being elected president, yet it's bringing about the sort of dynamics and that can really have a revolutionary change in this country. Yes. Much like you say, Bernie Sanders on the left is having. Yeah.
Donald Trump, to me, there's not much I like about the guy, honestly. I mean, as a person, I wouldn't like him. I don't like his personality. I don't like that he's so flamboyant and up in your face. There's numerous things that are I find really offensive about him. But like you said, I think he's one of the only ones. I look at all the other presidential candidates, and I can't see that any of these people have the ability to really institute much needed change in this country. And one of the places that everybody is afraid to talk about is the military. They're afraid to ever say anything bad about the military or speak of cuts in the military. And this is where it all has to start. We are a warring nation. We've got to curb ourselves from this stuff. We've got to wean ourselves, actually, someday, I think. That this is getting us nowhere, where it's putting us deeper and deeper into debt. And it's amazing how much the military takes out of us. I mean, financially and in every other way.
Yeah, I mean, that's really incredible, because the military spending is up to now almost $600 billion, which is over half of the discretionary spending of the entire federal government on defense spending. And there is no way that that is a sustainable proposition. I mean, the poor are getting poorer, the rich are getting rich, and we are just continually build up this war machine. And if you look at not only is that $600 billion a part of our discretionary spending, that money is spent on weapons. That money is spent to take corporations and turn them into these mega corporations, right, that now have more power and influence than many nation states. And it's a very frightening proposition, I think.
One of the things that troubles me most about the right wing, and I live with a Republican, so we have some really lively conversations.
Oh, that must be interesting.
It is. But one of the things that troubles me is the how they look at social problems and talk about all the waste and the needs for cutbacks and everything, and then you take the military. There's a statistic I used in a recent article that the Pentagon has lost. I mean, lost as in I don't know where it went. $8.5 trillion of money since I think it was 2005. I'm pretty sure that was the date. So this money has just disappeared, and they don't know where it went because they don't have to account for it. They asked the Pentagon to start accounting about 5 years ago, but they still haven't got around to.
Well, why is that acceptable? In what other area of life would that be acceptable? Oops, I lost $1 trillion. You know, absolutely no accountability.
They would shut down welfare, or they'd shut down Social Security if that was the case, but not the military. And, you know, and another thing that troubles me is the way we take care of our vets in this country. And it's really horrendous to hear these people. I've been following the elections really close, and it's awful to hear every one of these people say, well, when I get in office, boy, the veterans are going to be taken care of. Oh yeah, I'm going to change all this. Well, you know, we have groups like Wounded Warriors, which we have to, these poor wounded veterans have to go to get money. And even they're crooked. That was exposed recently, that a lot of the money that's going to Wounded Warriors is being spent on partying and other things. And this is one of the groups that everybody holds in high esteem. So there's these vets are going without, and we don't mind taking them into wars and having these horrendous wars, but when they come home, buddy, you're on your own. I served in Vietnam in 1968. I was in the Navy, and when I came back, when I got out of the military, I looked it back and I said, you know, this was such a waste. And I mean, McNamara talked about it. The war was a big flop. We shouldn't have been there. That whole thing should have taught everybody about what our goal should be in life. And it's not having war after war. I don't know why this country is so set on getting involved in being the world's police everywhere. It's costing us a fortune, and it's killing our sons and daughters. I've taught my kids to avoid the military at all costs. I'd like other people to do that as well.
Well, Walter Wink wrote this book called Jesus and Nonviolence, and he puts forward in this book this idea of the myth of redemptive violence, that there is, and he calls this really the religion of America, right? That there is in the soul of Americans this idea that we will be redeemed by violence. And I mean, certainly when we were children, that myth was expressed everywhere. It was expressed in our cartoons, it was expressed in westerns, you know, so forth and so on, right? That and we were taught to believe that. We were indoctrinated to believe that the way in which we will be saved as a people and as a nation is through myth. And I really think that there is something to that. That is really a deeply a religious view of the American people. And you know, it's sad to say, but how else could you possibly account for military spending like this, especially with absolutely no accountability?
It's an addiction. We're addicted to war, and then to make matters worse, the military-industrial complex has made it part of our everyday life. Now we've got the needle in us, and it's going to be really hard to find a way to pull it out. But somehow we've got to turn this around, and it is going to take the whole nation to get behind an understanding of this, that will lead us into another direction. The direction we're going in, this is going to ruin us.
That's quite amazing, you know. $600 million military budget and only $600 billion for the military budget, only $160 billion for veterans' benefits. That says it all, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
If you wouldn't mind talking about Vietnam for a minute, would that be all right? We could talk
Sure.
about some of your experiences. I'd really like to ask, you know, why in the world, why haven't we learned anything from Vietnam? Why was it with such a 56,000 lives lost, all of that taxpayer money spent, right, on a failed war, all of the tremendous social unrest in this country, and then all of these veterans that have come back here, and so many homeless veterans still on the streets from Vietnam, so much alcoholism, so much destruction. Why haven't we learned anything from that?
Oh, and they're killing themselves at a really rapid rate too, committing suicide. We haven't learned because the people, our leaders, from that point on up to now, don't want us to learn that. They don't want us to understand the message that what this is costing us. Like I said, well, go back to World War II. My dad and my stepfather both fought in World War II. Well, my dad came home with his leg missing. My stepfather was on the USS Indianapolis, and that was the last ship sunk, U.S. ship sunk during World War II. And that was the one where they were in the water for 5 days before they found them. And 800 men went in the water, and about 400 made it out. They were eaten by sharks, died of thirst, starvation. It was a horrible thing. He came back a ruined man. Well, World War II was a war that we had to have, I think. It's probably the last, if you want to call them good wars, I think it was the last good war that we've ever had. But
that wasn't totally fought for corporate interest.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Vietnam, when I'll use the My Lai massacre as an example, a very horrible thing that came out of that war, and the people back home were just astounded by the horror of this thing back then, and what had happened, and that was. I'm not sure of the time frame, but that was right around the time, I think, when the protests were getting stronger and stronger against the war. Well, now let's fast forward all these years, and you have what's going on now. We have President Obama, who I voted for twice. I thought he was going to be the man that would really change this country for the better. He was against the U.S. going out and taking over other countries, and I thought he would pull in his wings, and we'd just take care of ourselves here. Well, we're still fighting these same wars that Bush and the others gave us, and now and we're continuing to do it even now at a more rapid rate with drones. So what these drones are doing is they're killing people like the My Lai massacre killed. But the nice and clean thing is we can't see it now. We don't hear about this. These drones go in and drop bombs and kill all these innocent civilians, in addition to one or two people that they were after. And America, we sit back here thinking, well, this is a nice sanitary way to fight a war. And it's just as awful as the way we fought in Vietnam. It's just we're not getting our hands dirty is all, but we're still killing innocent people. Now, all these years that this has been going on since Vietnam, in my opinion, they need cannon fodder. Now, we don't have a draft anymore, but we have a volunteer army, and that's also made things very sanitary because your sons and daughters don't get drafted to go off to these wars, but the ones who do it so voluntarily are killing, and they're being killed and being injured and coming back home just like the Vietnam vets did, all screwed up, and then not being taken care of, that we talked about before. The military doesn't want anything to do with you once they've had their way.
You know, I read recently in about 3 or 4 different places in the last few months, right, that we have lost a little less than 6,000 people in these military conflicts, in the most recent military conflicts in this. And over 125,000 people have committed suicide? How can that possibly be? And why is no one talking about this?
They keep all that hidden. They don't want the American public to know, because they'll lose their soldiers. You know, they've got this, which is another thing they do, is they heap all of this false patriotism on us. They actually, I've read where they pay for it at sporting events. They actually go in and pay people to hold patriotic halftimes at games and things. And this is how they keep this up. They keep telling us, well, what you're doing, it's for the good of the country. It's make sure you're a real patriot if you do it. But what you're doing is we're fighting, it's corporate wars is what we're fighting. Those days are long gone. They haven't been here since Vietnam. We're no longer fighting wars to save this country. We're fighting wars to make the fat cats richer.
Well, and in the history of the United States, this I think you could make an argument that this really started after the Civil War, where you had the state and the power of the state and the power of the corporation coming together in the westward expansion after the Civil War. With the colonization of Native American peoples. And so, I mean, the real first victims of this totalitarian corporate state were Native American people.
Yes.
And then soon to be followed by the Cubans, the Philippines, and then South America, and then it was off to the races, right? But I mean, a simple definition of totalitarianism is when you have the power of corporations combined with the power of the state. And that's exactly what you had with the notion of manifest destiny. And Native Americans were the first people who suffered the terror of our modern totalitarian state. And I don't think, Tim, there's any doubt that we live, that our democracy has come to an end. That we aren't moving towards some sort of a totalitarian state. We are in a totalitarian state, and that our political system has been corrupted, and our federal government has been corrupted, and that decisions are made solely on what's good for the corporate masters,
stockholders,
who buy off the politicians. And is it any wonder that the people of the United States are angry about that? We should be angry about that, right?
I'm surprised it hasn't come sooner. That's what I've been amazed at. I thought, gee, I hope this happens in my lifetime, because I really wanted to see the people fight back and get this country in a place. Like you said, this country was founded on the annihilation of Native Americans and slavery. Well, we had a lot to overcome there. We should have learned something from that. We should have become a gentler, more loving country. But it just keeps going on, and I wonder if there is a way to end this. And I certainly don't see it with any of these politicians that we have running right now, other than the possibility of Bernie Sanders, and Donald Trump is the wild card. You put him out there, anything's liable to happen. But I certainly would go with either one of those two than I would any of those other politicians. It's more of the same, especially Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. Well, this is a real disappointment for me personally, because my dad worked for Cummins Diesel Company in Columbus, Indiana, down in the southern part of Indiana, and my dad was always a union guy, right? And being a union guy, he was always a Democrat. And Irvin Miller owned the company Cummins Diesel that my dad worked for, and he was one of the vice presidential candidate when. Who was the guy from Arizona, from Phoenix, the politician that ran for president?
Oh, I know who you mean.
Goldwater.
Yeah.
Right. So he was the vice president when Goldwater ran for office, and so I I was raised with a union conscience, right? And then, when I became a man, then I made it my business to know about the history of the unions in this country and the class warfare that occurred in this country, that people don't want to speak about, the thousands and thousands of workers that were massacred and starved to death in this country. And it's what the Democrats have done for the working class in the last 20 years is simply thrown them under the bus. And, you said that you voted for Obama. I voted for Obama, too. And one of the great disappointments of his presidency was this disenfranchisement of the Democrats from the unions. And you remember a few years ago when collective bargaining, when the Republicans went after collective bargaining there in Wisconsin, right? President, nothing to say, the Democrats said. I mean, they should have been out in the streets in mass there, right? And it's no wonder that working class people in this country are angry, that they're confused, and that they are not persuaded by the rhetoric of not only the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party.
Yeah. See, here's another thing that they've done to us that I think it's actually very clear. They have found a way to pit us against one another, even Republicans and Democrats. And like I mentioned earlier, I live with a Republican. I live in Fortuna, and since I moved in with my girlfriend, I've been around these people, a lot of loggers, a lot of people that work with their hands for a living and work very hard. And what I've seen is they're no different than Democrats. They want you to think they are. My girlfriend, as far as giving to charities and everything, she's the most giving person there is. I've actually had to pull her back from that. She just wants everybody that calls her, she wants to give them money to help these charities. And she's putting herself in great debt by doing it, but she's a very loving, giving person. And I've met a lot of her friends, and they are the same way. There's really no difference in us. They want you to think that so they can have their two-party system.
Divide and conquer.
Yes. Yeah. And and they've been pretty successful at it. But I think what I see with Trump going on right now, and I'm starting to hear the pundits say too, and I've seen this already myself, a lot of Democrats are considering voting for Trump because they see him as the only hope for any kind of change. Now, they may not like, and I've heard a lot of them say, I don't like the way he talks, I don't like the things he says, but he is the one who can possibly bring about some much-needed change.
Well, it's a sad state of affairs when working class Democrats start to believe that a Republican, fascist, capitalist has their best interest, has their back. That's
it's pretty sad, isn't it?
Well, that's a bizarre state of affairs. I mean, Trump is a demagogue, right? Trump is a dangerous man. Trump does not represent simply himself. Trump represents the Trump brand. He represents the Trump corporation. But it's a big, wealthy corporation. And to think that working class people can't see through that, to see that there is no way on God's earth that a man like Donald Trump could represent their interest, apart from the fact that he has this maverick spirit about him, and he does. I mean, at least I will give him this amount of credit, that he does speak out against these horrific trade deals that the Democrats have helped to bring about with the Republicans that have decimated and gutted working class people here. And I have no idea why anyone would want to vote for Hillary Clinton. I have no idea why anybody would want to vote for Donald Trump.
It's all an act of desperation at this point.
Yeah. But I mean, it's sad, isn't it, because it seems like we're in agreement that it is this two-party system itself that has been the backbone of this country all along that has brought this country to its knees, because the only difference between a Democrat and a Republican now is that, whose knee is going to hit the ground first to genuflect to their corporate masters, right?
Exactly.
And what's so devious and disgusting about it is that they worship the same corporate masters. They're beholding to exactly the same people, right? And, that's demonic, man. Do you know? What's more demonic than that? Well, we're going to confuse and deceive the people to the point where they don't know what the hell's going on in this country.
And they've been very successful at it.
Very, very, very successful at it. Very successful at it.
When I joined the military in 1966, I was told, don't ask questions. And that was the way you survived in the military. You never ask who you're going to fight. Like we were headed to Vietnam, and it's like, just do your job. Don't ask any questions. I didn't even know who the Vietnamese were.
Well, I read that when the war started, right? 90% of the American people didn't even know where Vietnam was. It's wild, isn't it?
It is.
Wild. You're sending your children off to die for a political ideology that has been given you on television by politicians, and you don't even know where the damn country is, right? It's grotesque. It's really grotesque.
Well, they had the money. They had the ability to sell us their book of their goods, and we all bought it, and we continue to buy it. And I think one of the problems is there has to be more of what we're doing right here. We have to get people talking about this, showing other ideas, showing other ways of thinking about what's going on in this country. You and I are getting old. I hope the young people pick up on this. That's one thing I loved about the 60s. I loved the revolution. I loved the talk of it. I loved how the kids got out and fought against the war and spoke their mind. I don't see any of that going on anymore. Maybe it would take another draft for it to happen, but I don't see it happening, and it really makes me sad.
Yeah, and it's, Marx said at the end of latter days of capitalism that human beings would not be able to distinguish between a natural need and a synthetic need, right? The need for love, for real human communication, a human solidarity, as opposed to the need to have a Buick, do you know? And certainly, we can see here that in the latter days of capitalism, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I don't think that this is a sustainable system, and I think that what happened in 2008 with the raiding of the federal treasury is just a foretaste of the feast to come, and that this is not a sustainable economic or political system that we have, and that revolt and the revolution is going to occur one way or the other. It's inevitable. It's inevitable unless something is done, right? And I thought it was very fascinating that when Bernie Sanders says that, you have to understand, even if you elect me as president of the United States, I can't solve these problems for you, right? That it's not the president that's going to bring about revolt and revolution in this country, but that has to be a grassroots movement of the people. And, it's very difficult to get a grassroots movement of the people when, they spend half of their time watching television. Do you know?
Yeah, I have faith in the American people. What I don't have faith in is our leaders. I've lost complete faith in all of our leaders. I don't know, maybe even on a local level. I don't trust people who are in office. They usually talk out of one side of their mouth and do something different out of the other. And I think that if push came to shove, and anything does come down in this country, the American people will pull through. I think there's a lot of good people out there who can. Yes, they're sold these bill of goods. This whole capitalism thing, where it's like you were saying earlier, it's your need for a Buick. Well, a lot of people understand that. They like to have things, but I don't think it's as important to them as it is to the people in charge who have a lot of things, who have a lot of money. They've got a lot to lose. A lot of us people who don't have much to lose, we're happy with not having much. And I think that's the brand of capitalism that I like. It's one where you make do on a lot less. I think it's the small is beautiful, America. I think that's a very healthy thing to do, to teach your kids to get by on less, to not want everything. I know it's difficult because, kids, they want all the latest stuff, but I think that if you can, that's almost like a religion to me. I think it should be a religion, one that you teach your kids that buying things isn't everything in this world, and teach yourself too, that doing things for other people, doing creative things, enjoying the countryside that we have. Here in Humboldt County, we've got so much to, go to the beach, go up in the woods and just walk around and see how beautiful that is. Don't always be thinking about purchasing all the time. And anyway, I think that's another problem that we have that could put us on the right track, I think.
Well, one of the things that's not being purchased are books.
Yes.
I read a frightening article the other day that said that the overwhelming majority of people that graduate from high school never, ever read a book again. And of the people, can you imagine this, right? Of the people who, college graduates, right, I think it's like 40% of those people never read a book again, right? And, my desperation, I don't want to say despair, but, I don't have much hope for a situation where, people spend so much of their time getting their news from the media, and the media is owned by the very corporate interest that owns the military, that owns the federal government, right? And so you're constantly bombarded with what Chris Hedges wrote, this marvelous book about America, he called it The Empire of Illusion. And I love that title because, life is becoming more and more illusory. People are going, I think, more and more into magic. I spent a lot of time in religion. I'm a Lutheran minister and theologian, and I see this all of the time. The overwhelming brand of religion in America is evangelical Protestant fundamentalism, right? Which is a literal interpretation of religious symbols and metaphors, and which is, a magical way of thinking, basically. And, you can certainly see why in these desperate times people are drawn towards illusion.
Yes.
But then when you have a media that purposely, consciously, intentionally presents these illusions, these economic illusions, these like you say about the military. Every time you turn on television, you can't watch a sporting event without bombers going over, right? Now, what does football have to do with the military? Right? Every time you turn on television, you see, 3 or 4 commercials having to do with selling veterans insurance, or trying to sell veterans a home, right? And so you're constantly bombarded by these militaristic images, and to me, like you said earlier, what's happening here is that, they're priming the next generation for the fight. And then I'm reminded of this notion that, you get to a certain point where the idea isn't to win a war, but the idea is to be in a state of perpetual war. Right?
Yeah.
And that is one of the great, I think, demonic evils of corporate totalitarianism, right? And so you never hear about the fact that 125,000 young men and women have committed suicide, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You never hear about that because there's an illusion, there's a sleight of hand that has to happen here in order to get the next generation to buy into this myth of redemptive violence.
And it's not very hard for them to do because, like when I was in high school, the Marines would come right into our classroom and sell their goods to us. They would give you the papers. They say, take these home, have your mom and dad sign them if you're not 18. If you were 17, you had to get them signed, but most parents were happy to do it.
Yeah.
But not many parents, because if you say anything wrong against the military, if you put it down, or it's like putting down the whole country. That's what they want you to believe. You're not a patriotic American. You're a piece of garbage. I had a friend who, in high school, his parents were smart. Instead of, he was up for the draft, and instead of going, he went to Canada. And that poor guy, though, it ruined his life. He never came back. He never felt like he could come back. And I think after a certain amount of time, they allowed these men and women back into the country. But it's just so sad because you always get that one side. It's the people that have the money and the ability to sell things, and now they bring their fancy Humvees to the campuses, high school campuses, and hand out trinkets and show how glamorous military life is, just like they did back then. And thank goodness we have like an organization like Vets for Peace, who they're the only ones out there trying to really fight this and explain to people that, this is ridiculous. Don't fall for this trick. Your kids are going to go off and get wounded and killed. And they're going to come home a mess from killing other people. It's just one generation after another, and all we have is in our corner is this little group, Vets for Peace, who are actually trying to do something about it. And I wish more people would get involved with this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's very difficult. I mean, if you look at the '60s, this mass movement of the young was organized on college campuses. So you had a space of revolt, a safe space of revolt. Now it's very difficult. That's been taken away. I mean, look at Occupy Wall Street, right?
Oh, yeah.
As soon as that happened, as soon as their cages started to get rattled a little bit, the first thing that they came down on was, well, we have to take away the space. We have to take away the parks, right? Because unfortunately, our universities has just become a extension of corporations.
I see that too.
Corporate interest, and part of that is, that we don't educate people for the common good. So much of education now, because education itself has become a commodity, because everything in the capitalistic system ultimately becomes a commodity. Your children become a commodity, your children's education become a commodity, right? So when education becomes a commodity, then, the game's lost. The game's lost, right? And then, and you see this not only in education, but that's happening in the church. There is no political left in the church now, right? And it has always been quite clear to me that American evangelical, that this evangelical movement in America, Protestantism itself really worships the state. And that's why I really appeal to this idea of the myth of redemptive violence as really being defining the heart of American religion. We do not worship the sacred. We do not worship this spirit of life that unites all of us together, even our enemies. Right? We aren't concerned with that notion anymore. We have been fixated on the idea of redeeming ourselves through violence. And that's a sad situation.
And money.
Money.
My brother is a fundamentalist Christian down in near Orange Gun, Inland Empire by San Bernardino, and he belongs to a huge church. And what they tell them is, if you give us money, if you bring money into us, we will make you more money, because we'll bless you through the Lord, and your Lord will make you richer. And they talk about that a lot. And my brother, he goes for it. He thinks that's the way he's going to get wealthier is to show the Lord that He'll give him all the money he needs, so the Lord will reward. It's a weird way of thinking. I don't quite get it, but that's his brand of religion, and he goes for that. And of course he never questions anything in that church. Never, you're not allowed to raise your hand and ask any kind of questions, but I just think that's really strange. It's a way for the church to make money. Another, like you said, all is lost. Everything becomes a commodity.
Yeah. And how boring is that?
Oh.
I mean, really, right?
Yeah.
This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimper, right? Yeah. It's these are interesting dynamics and interesting times that we live in. You know, I read an article that you wrote recently on the NRA, and you've written a number of about articles on the NRA and about this relationship between the NRA and law enforcement and the military, because this is becoming quite a little dynamic now in our culture as well, right? That the militarization of the police and this what I would consider this radical interpretation of the Second Amendment that. By God, we all have a right to have a gun. We all should have a gun, and And now, certain states. My wife and I lived in Arizona for many years. Of course, they loved their guns out in Arizona, and they. At least it used to be you couldn't bring them in school or in a bar because it's probably not a good idea to have a gun around a bunch of kids or drunks, right? But that's our American right now, which I think is not a proper or interpretation of the Second Amendment. It's a radical interpretation of the Second Amendment, but we certainly see that this not only guns, but the militarization of the police in our culture is becoming rather frightening. Almost to the point where, at least symbolically or visually, the visual image is you can't tell. Is this a military operation, or this is the local Ferguson, Missouri police force?
Very small
Scary,
towns,
scary
small
stuff.
towns with these vehicles made SWAT teams. Actually, Humboldt State. I worked up there for 30 years, and when I started work there, it was 1974. They had one policeman on that campus, and he didn't have a gun, and he walked around, and all he did was patrol through the whole campus. And by the time I left, they had like countless officers. They had, although I called the chief of police on this, and she denied it. They have some kind of a SWAT team.
Where was this?
Humboldt State.
Oh, at Humboldt State.
Yeah, and
that's great, a SWAT team.
Well, it's like she says, well, we don't really have that. But I remember when I was working there during my last years, they were always doing little drills. And they had all kinds of gear, tons and tons. The military gives these.
But they're gluten-free, though.
Yeah. And
the gluten-free military guys.
But it's amazing how much that cost taxpayers to have all these police on this campus, and what are they doing? They're arresting a skateboarder once in a while. Once every so often they have like a rape case or something on there. But it's like, I don't know how they ever justify that, having such a huge police force on that campus when they have the Arcata police that could step in and take care of anything that happens. But they're starting to scare me because I don't like what's going on across the nation with the way that police are handling different things and shooting to kill instead of trying to subdue people. I mean, it just keeps happening over and over, and it's becoming almost an everyday thing now. And I wrote an article on this, and oh boy, did I get the hate mail because once again, it's like the military. You do not say anything against the police. Recently there was a Hollywood director who spoke up against police violence, and they tried to, the police actually threatened him. I wrote a column on it. I can't even remember his name now. But what they did was they blacklisted his movies, and he had one coming out, and they said, nobody go to see these movies. This guy hates cops.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't hate cops. He doesn't want policemen killing people and getting away with it.
Yeah, and in a state religion, when you have a state religion, right, the police are like the acolytes of the faith, right? And that's not to say that there are many wonderful, brave police officers, right? But the idea is, if you can't criticize the acolytes of the church, right? You can't criticize the police because they're part of the state religion, you know.
That's right.
And how can there be trillions of dollars lost by the Pentagon and have no consequences? Well, because you don't question the great Oz, right?
That's right.
This is God's will. You don't question the Vatican, right? And I mean the military and industrial complex is sort of the secular version of the Vatican for the state religion that we have here, and I think that you see this in so many different ways.
I've brought that up, that 8.5 trillion lost so many times, and I have actually had people tell me, well, good, let's give them more money. This is the military, they're good for this country. Well, how could that be good? They lost all of the money that we've given them. They've spent it, or who knows where that money's gone. They're known for doing really underhanded things, supplying other countries with weapons that get used on our soldiers. That's happened many, many times. And you're right, how can that not get questioned? But that's what's happening right now in the POTUS run for president. Nobody is questioning this. They are deathly afraid to say anything about the military, the Pentagon.
Well, I don't hear any of them speaking about this, do you?
No.
I mean, when they speak about economic issues, they hardly ever speak about the gorilla in the room, is that you cannot have over 50% of your discretionary funding of the budget of the United States going to support the military-industrial complex without bringing down the entire economy of the United States.
That's where we're headed.
And that's the reality of the situation. They don't talk about it because it's like criticizing the Pope or something, right?
All this is about is getting...
That's the realm of the sacred for the corporate totalitarian state. The realm of the sacred is the military-industrial complex, right? I mean, if we don't call this what it is, what's to become of us? And why is it that it is in conversations like this where this happens, but you don't hear this on a national level? You don't hear it on CNN, you don't hear it on Fox News, and you don't hear it in these orchestrated political debates, even when it's a presidential a run for the presidency.
Well, that's because
it's very, very peculiar.
It's because nobody can get voted into office talking about it. Nobody can make a dollar talking about it. This could be detrimental to people who have. Once again, when I worked at Humboldt State, I was not allowed to get involved in anything political. They said that's grounds for dismissal. So while the students were out marching and the professors, I was part of the staff. You were not allowed to take part in any of that.
Because as a member of the staff, you were representing the interest of the institution. Then.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. But the thing is that you find that in most people, almost every job, if you post bad things on Facebook or things that are against the state or that look bad, make the corporation or the company look bad, that's grounds for dismissal. And so you really don't have. I found out I didn't even have my rights until I retired, and I was finally able to write columns and speak up and say what I really felt. Before that, I never said a word for fear of losing my job.
Yeah, that's interesting. And for how many years did you work at
30.
Wow, 30 years. 30 years, and it was only after you left a university that you felt you had the freedom of speech.
Yes. Isn't that funny?
Wow, it's
Or
very,
sad?
very, very ironic, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
Well, you know, this has been a marvelous conversation.
It has, Lynn.
And I hope that this is one of many conversations that you and I will have. And I really admire your work, what you've done in your life, and keep up the good work.
Thank you,
And
Lynn.
come back and
Thanks
see
for
us. I would
having me.
love for you to be a regular on the
I'd love to.
program. All right. Thank you very much.
You bet.